IVM.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we share the journey of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very, very special episode of the Musafir Stories. We are celebrating 5 years of the podcast this month. The Musafir Stories is a labor of love and wouldn't have been possible without our wonderful guests and, of course, you, our listeners, who have been a part of our journey over these years. Thank you so much for all your support and love that has kept us going. On the podcast today, we speak to Yunus Lasania, a journalist and a heritage expert who takes us on a walk around the remarkable old city of Hyderabad. As part of the episode and, of course, our 5th year anniversary, we are giving away 5 tickets to Yunus's heritage walk. All you have to do is listen to the episode and answer 3 very simple questions. Good luck and on with today's episode.
So with that introduction, we'd love to welcome Yunus Lasania, a journalist, heritage expert, oral historian, host of the podcast Beyond Charminar, and also a curator of the Hyderabad History Project. Yunus, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and quite a bio to have. Running out of breath now to fit everything in one go.
Thank you so much. Of course, I am primarily for most parts a journalist because I do so. Most of it has to do with my love for writing. I am a writer primarily, but everything else comes afterwards.
Yeah, thank you. And sure, through your intro, people would have realized that you have a heavy connection to Hyderabad and Hyderabad's history, right? Both through your podcast, the Hyderabad History Project that you curate on Instagram, as well as obviously the walks you do, which we'll discuss a little bit more about today. But tell us a little bit more about when all of this started.
So for those of you who are maybe listening and who are not aware of Hyderabad's history, in general. So the last ruler or the last monarch of Hyderabad had his 50th death anniversary in 2017, February 24th, if I'm not wrong. At that point of time, I was working as a reporter with the Hindu, and I was starting to cover a lot of history stuff, heritage and stuff. So apparently there's a small thing that happens every year at his grave, which is not surprising. But then I was like, maybe we can do something else, and that's when I just met a couple of people who knew him and I actually pitched that idea for the Hindu Sunday edition, which was then just launched. So after I wrote that article, it kind of went like, I wouldn't say went viral like in today's terms. Like how when we say that something goes viral, it's like literally at every single place and across all over Google, right?
Yeah.
But it was very well received, is what I would say. Like I got a whole bunch of emails, a couple of them from the US. I got some emails from Delhi about this and that. I remember some family member also emailing me. Bunch of my own family members also read that article I wrote, and then I realized, okay, so clearly people are interested in this kind of stuff, but nobody's writing things that need to be written. So that is what. So that 2017 March, incidentally, the same year, nearly the same time, someone introduced me to a forum and told them I can, since I have a lot of information on Hyderabad, I might be able to conduct walks. So incidentally, the first walk I did at that point of time was a food walk and not actually a history walk. I didn't even know about what the Badshah Ashur Khana was. That was like the first time, and then I did another walk another month later. And the thing is, I was also pretty much still learning about Hyderabad at that point of time. Right. So I think by 2017 ending is when I started I thought, I should do something like, something seriously. So so that's just how it started. I just started very randomly writing about, and also it made me kind of connect with my own city. It took me I guess 26 years of my life to learn about my own city. So then I thought people should also know about Hyderabad the way I'm learning about Hyderabad. And history, like in schools when we learn history, it's very boring. It's all just dates and this and that. So then I thought, I thought I should probably connect everyday buildings or everyday objects that people see to their lives. That way, it would make more sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is something about the local history as well, right? That, obviously you living in Hyderabad would still be exposed to some amount of it in your curriculum and all of that. But people outside of it, it's even lesser, right? People in a different state.
No, actually, the thing is, I don't remember reading anything about Hyderabad in
Right.
history books.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, that was a problem, like a inter-Andhra Telangana issue that was there. I think that's now been rectified, where Hyderabad history, Telangana history is there in our books. I think it's a very Indian problem in that sense. It's not necessarily about Hyderabad.
Right.
People mostly grow up detached about their own city's history, and they basically have no sense of belonging. So,
Yeah.
which I do have now. So, I think in that sense, most of my work has always been to just help people connect with their own cities. That's it.
Yeah, no, especially with the rote learning type of format in schools and academics as well. You're very much, like I said, focusing on names and dates more than learning about the
exactly.
stories, right? So I
It's very
think,
boring.
yeah, it gets very boring, and yeah, you miss out on a lot of the good stuff, right? All the juice in the stories, you miss out on all of that. So I think walks like these are a great way of discovering that local history. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Yunus. And about today's topic of discussion as well, right? We wanted to turn the focus a little bit on one of the walks you do, and especially I was very keen on the Old City walk, because that's really the heart of the Old Hyderabad city as well, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about the walk itself, where it starts, and a little bit about the Old City too? Like, where exactly is
So,
this?
the thing is, a lot of people don't actually realize that when we talk about the old city, we only talk about, I understand this whole thing about cities having older areas and stuff, but what is funny is Hyderabad's old city actually isn't the oldest part of the city. It is the Golconda Fort.
Right.
Fort was established as a city in the year 1518 as the capital of the Golconda Kingdom. So Hyderabad was built much later in 1591 by the Qutub Shahi or the Golconda kings. So there's like a 70-something year gap between the fort and the city. So what I'm trying to say is that Hyderabad essentially used to be a new city to the Golconda fort.
So it's a little bit of a misnomer, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, of course. So the thing is, people do go to the Golconda fort as well. They just don't realize that the fort predates it by that extent. But the thing is, the old city was meant to be like this major, new, gorgeously built city which had everything, and it was that. And so the thing is, I'll just, whoever is listening, so the Hyderabad was founded in 1591 by Mohammed Quli Qutub Shah, the fourth king of the Golconda Kingdom. The Golconda Kingdom is the dynasty that built the Golconda Fort, obviously. The fort was essentially a proper walled city, which is about roughly 7 kilometers in circumference. The boundary walls of the Golconda Fort still exist. The fort was not enough for people to live in, which is why after a point the kings decided to move out. And that is why Hyderabad was built by Mohammed Quli Qutub Shah. So when the city was built, it was not just the Charminar. You had a whole bunch of, for that time, you had like a whole bunch of modern institutions that were constructed, like even a hospital called the Darul Shifa. Darul Shifa stands for House of Healing, I believe. You have Darul Shifa, you have the Badshah Ashur Khana. For those of you who don't know what this is, an Ashur Khana is where Shia Muslims mourn the death of the Prophet Muhammad's grandson Imam Hussein every year. And you have the Ashur Khana, and you had like a whole bunch of buildings that were constructed. So the thing is, about the old city, we actually don't know how Hyderabad used to look originally, because the entire city was razed to the ground in the year 1687 by the Mughal king Aurangazeb. So the Mughals actually conquered Hyderabad in 1687, and they destroyed the entire city to the point where there's actually nothing much left from the original city. The Charminar, of course, is still intact. The Charminar, the Badshah Ashur Khan, the Makkah Masjid, the Golconda Fort, the Qutub Shahi tombs, and maybe there are about 50 buildings left from the original city, I guess. not more than that, or maybe I could be wrong. But what I'm trying to say is that there aren't a lot of things remaining from the city's original foundation. Just for context, the Nizams of Hyderabad, who come much later, the Nizams are actually soldiers, or sorry, commanders working under the Mughals. So essentially, they were part of the Mughal armies that destroyed Hyderabad in 1687, right?
Right.
It's a very common thing across the world where you have a where you have a soldier becoming a general, and then from a general becoming a governor, and then becoming a king. So it's not a very unheard of trajectory. It's a very common trajectory. For all we know, after Hyderabad was destroyed, any other commander could have become the Nizam of Hyderabad, but it was fate eventually that chose the Nizams.
And these are the Asaf Shahis, right?
Yeah, the Asaf Jahis, yeah. So there's a gap of some 30 something years from 1687 when Hyderabad is destroyed up to 1724. You have the first Nizam who does take control for a bit, but then you have other governors as well. And these governors are ruling from Aurangabad and Maharashtra and not from Hyderabad, because they don't have just Hyderabad and the Golconda Empire. They have pretty much about roughly one third of South India. Sorry, they have one third of India, which includes major parts of Central and South India. So that's what the areas of the Nizam were, at least in the 1700s initially. So it is the second Nizam who decides to move back to Hyderabad and shift his capital from Aurangabad to Hyderabad. So when we go to the old city today, so most of Hyderabad's institutions and monuments that we have are actually things that date back to the early 20th and to the mid 20th century, essentially under the last Nizam. So what you have are mostly buildings built by the last Nizam in his effort to modernize Hyderabad. So when we do the old city walk, it's a mix of the oldest foundational monument and some modern structures in that sense. So for a very basic introductory walk, I've come to realize that it's very confusing for a lot of people.
Sure.
So to make it interesting, I have to stick to some interesting stories and some interesting facts. Can't just give them dates, because that's when history gets very boring, right?
Yeah.
So context is always important. So that's why when we do the old city or history walk, ideally speaking, I should be walking from the Charminar to the Badshah Ashur Khana, because the Ashur Khana was built in 1593, 2 years after the Charminar. But the Charminar does not open till 9. And the Ashur Khana luckily is open from super early in the morning. So what we do is we go to the Ashur Khana, we explore the Ashur Khana. Early morning is pretty calm and there's not much traffic. So we have to stop for breakfast, and then we walk to the Charminar by 9. In between that walk from the Ashur Khana to the Charminar, you have a bunch of institutions also. So I try to include whatever there is in between. So but the Ashur Khana and Charminar we cover. There's breakfast and there is chai in between. So most of the time it's a good start to the day, and I end the walk at the Charminar, where I go into the physical aspects and how I try to at least mentally give a picture of maybe how the city once used to be.
Right.
And that's that. I don't go into the second, the modern part of Hyderabad under the Nizam part, because obviously the foundations don't have anything to do with the Nizams.
Yeah.
That walk I do separately at the Chowmahalla Palace or at the museums.
Yeah, we could definitely touch upon that towards the end of this. And just to kind of go back to some of the callouts, right? You did mention that there's some interesting stories. Yunus, in terms of just the name of the place also, right? Hyderabad, do you want to add a little more color as to how that name came into being? And also there's obviously other names associated to the place as well, like Bhagyanagar is one of the names that pops up, right? So
Okay.
if you want to give a quick peek into that.
So the thing is, if you look at Hyderabad history, the foundational history essentially is there's a legend attached to the city that the founding king Mohammed Quli Qutub Shah was in love with a dancer slash commoner by the name Bhagmati, who lived somewhere in waters in the area what came to be known as Hyderabad Charminar eventually. But see, it's a legend. There is some evidence on both sides, in the sense that there are contemporary sources that mention Bhagmati from the 16th century. At the same time, we don't actually have definite proof that she existed, because there is no physical evidence, there's no trace of her existence in that sense. So it's still disputed history. Now the story is that Muhammad Quli Qutub Shah named the city Bagnagar, and it was later renamed to Hyderabad. Even as far as that is concerned, sure, even if there is proof that Hyderabad was called Bagnagar, it is named after Bagmati. Okay. what the current renaming issue is, it has nothing to do with Bhagmati or Mohammed Quli Qutub Shah. What they're attaching to it is this unauthorized temple that is built on the Charminar. The temple is not very old. There are several photos of the Charminar without the temple, even going back to some decades ago. So this is not like a Ram Janmabhoomi temple issue where somebody's claiming that Charminar was built on it to insult somebody. It's nothing like that. Charminar was pretty much simply built to mark Hyderabad's foundation in 1591 when this new city was built. That's about it. There is there are definitely temples older than Hyderabad itself somewhere around in these areas, but the temple on the Charminar is even archaeologically very obvious and very clear that it's a cement structure. So if you call yourself a historian or an architect or anything, it's just going to be, nobody's going to take you seriously if you ever say that the temple existed before the Charminar. More importantly, it is dangerous to the monument and to people because it's a cement structure that is attached to a structure built with lime mortar, and if it could easily collapse at some point. So it's just very dangerous.
Yeah, that's true. But like to your point, I think the history ties back to one like setting up of this new city, and there's also another thing I came across was that this is built just right after the plague or praying for the plague to end, something on those lines.
So the plague thing also is not exactly 100% thing. It does correspond with the bubonic plague at that point of time, but as far as Hyderabad is concerned, I don't think that it is 100% certain that there was a plague. The idea to actually construct a new city outside of the Golconda fort was originally Mohammed Quli Qutub Shah's father. Okay, so it is not a new idea in that sense. Mostly from what our understanding is that the area where the Charminar is today was pretty much chosen because of the availability of water. Because Hyderabad was built, or I guess was founded on the southern banks of the Musi River, with the very specific intention of the requirement of water. So the plague thing may or may not be true, but the other issue is what it is.
Right. Yeah. So thanks so much for kind of shedding some more light on those other stories. Also, I know some of them there is still a certain amount of dispute, but again, it's good to know the different kinds of legends and folklore that are associated to the names and of the place as well, right? And Hyderabad Mahal, I guess, was the name of the wife of the ruler, I think.
Yeah. So the official story says that the city was first called Bhagnagar, and after Bhagmati converted, she took on the name of Hyder Mahal, which it actually does not make sense because Mohammed Quli Qutub Shah's own mother was a Hindu. So if at all he married to a non-Muslim woman, her converting to Islam, I mean, I guess you could say maybe she did, but I don't think that would have been necessary given their history. Okay. So that's what I believe. That's why I said it's disputed history, right? So I always tell people they can believe in anything that they want to.
Yeah, sure. No, but thanks so much for calling that out. And just going back to like where you begin the work as well, right?
Right.
Yunus, you mentioned that you start this as the Badshah Ashur Khana, right? Yeah, do you want to call out a little bit about that, like in terms of the structure, what it is, and also primarily like a Shia Muslim monument or place of mourning, like you said, right? That's what these Ashur Khanas are. Can you shed some more light and detail about that too, please?
So for those of you who are not aware, Shia Muslims are essentially followers of the Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law and cousin, Imam Ali. So the Badshah Ashur Khana is a very specifically Shia Muslim monument, and the Charminar in fact also has a whole bunch of Shia Islamic influences in that sense. So do a lot of the foundational monuments, because obviously they were Shia Muslims, but there are a lot of local Telugu Hindu influences as well, which is a very common Indian thing to do by most of our kings. They mix it, the architecture, everything is a proper confluence. It's not necessarily a mix or anything. So it's just, they are kings who had some Persian sensibility, but they were pretty much in that sense Hyderabadi or from the state, from Telangana. They called themselves sons of Telangana. So the Badshah Ashur Khana was built by Mohammed Quli Qutub Shah in 1593, 2 years after he built Hyderabad. So going back to what I was saying, the followers of the Prophet, the followers of Imam Ali, who was the Prophet's son-in-law and cousin, are Shia Muslims. So essentially, if you look at Islam also, after the Prophet Muhammad's death in the 7th century, there was essentially a an issue of who will become the leader of all the Muslims now. In that sense, that's pretty much what I can tell it to people who are not aware of, the intricacies of what happened post the Prophet Muhammad's life. Essentially, it was a succession issue. One of Imam Ali's sons, Imam Hussein, also gets killed in what is known as the Battle of Karbala. He was killed along with 72, I think, of his followers. His death took place on the 10th day of Muharram, which is the first month of the Islamic calendar, because he died on the 10th day of Muharram, which is called Ashura. Shia Muslims construct Ashur Khana. The word Ashura means 10. So the Badshah Ashur Khana is essentially nothing but a Shia Muslim place of mourning, and the Qutub Shahis, being the Qutub Shahi kings who had a lot of sense with regard to local culture, also encouraged local Hindus to take care to participate in the Shia traditions, which is why Muharram is a very mixed tradition. As in, you'll find a lot of Hindus also going to the Ashur Khanas here every year. So that monument still pretty much stands. As far as I'm concerned, it is the most important monument in the city after the Charminar. So that's why I always make sure I take people there, no matter what.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And how far away from the Charminar is this?
Maybe 7 minutes by walk.
Okay. So fairly close by, and yeah, definitely. Even in terms of the architecture, right? Looks like a lot of the Persian influences, all this and on this as well, and very, very colorful also, right? Some of the internal.
Yeah, so you have it pretty much looks very similar to a lot of the architecture. You will probably feel like you're in Iran, is what I can say, or maybe even Uzbekistan for that matter. They did use Persian tiles, mosaic tiles. Unfortunately, a lot of the tiles have been lost due to damage over the years. So, but good chunks of it are still there.
Okay.
So it is still a very beautiful place.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And from here, you mentioned that usually as you walk, you make a stopover for breakfast or chai or breakfast, right? Before you.
So the thing is, I would always stop for a proper Hyderabadi breakfast, which is keema, roti, etc., things like that, no, which is mostly non-veg. But then there is this thing called Govind's dosa bandi, which is basically it's a small push cart, which is actually pretty tasty. So the thing is, maybe out of 100% of the people who come, sometimes maybe just 2, 3, sometimes maybe just one, sometimes maybe it's 5 who don't eat meat.
Right.
So I just need something that's more. It's easier for me to just. So we have nowadays this Hyderabad is now picked up hugely on this concept of cheese dosa, which is not just cheese, but you will have these. I guess it's like a modern hodgepodge of a dosa, where basically on the batter you slap on butter, you slap on upma and masala, and then some onions and stuff, and then you just dump it with a slice of ghee. Sorry, with a slice of cheese. It's like this very neo-noir dosa is what I call it. So it's pretty tasty. Of course, dosa purists might not agree that it is dosa. I mean, of course, we can, and that's not a problem with me. But yeah, so that's where we stop for dosa generally. So then we walk. So by the time we reach Charminar by 9 or 8:45, it opens up. So that's what the typical walk is. On the way, we also have something called the Pathargatti market. It is basically a Nizam era market that was built in the 1920s. So if somebody wants to stop there for some photos and stuff, we stop there for like a couple of minutes. And the small things on the way there that I show people, something like Gulzar House. Gulzar House is now a dirty yellow fountain, but originally that was supposed to be a drinking water fountain built with Hyderabad. The original structure, of course, does not exist anymore, but whatever exists of it, we see that.
Yeah, this is the Gulzar House, H-A-U-S or
Yes,
H-A-U-Z, right?
H-O-U-Z essentially stands for water fountain in Persian.
Right. So yeah, that's one more as a stopover. Definitely something that one can check out. Tell us a little bit more about Charminar as well. Like obviously the most symbolic structure of Hyderabad, right? The most iconic.
So the Charminar is essentially Hyderabad's foundation. That is the first monument built. 50, I think 160 feet is the height of it, and it's a very interesting monument because when it was built, it was very specifically constructed with the idea to make it a very unique monument in that sense, to build something that was not there, and it is still very unique in that sense. It is, it's not like Delhi's old city, where, like Shah Jahanabad, where you have, for example, in the Jama Masjid, which is like an extremely congested place. Coming back to the Charminar, you have this monument which was built very specifically with the idea to make it like the center of the new city. And it is still, very unique in that sense. It is not like Delhi's old city, where like Shah Jahanabad, where you have, for example, in the Jama Masjid, which is like an extremely congested place. Coming back to the Charminar, you have this monument which was built very specifically with the idea to make it like the center of the new city. So that is exactly what it is. It served as the center of the new city. You had everything that came up around it. It has a lot of Shia Muslim motifs and also a lot of floral motifs which you will find only in temples. So very clearly, it's a mix between it's Indo-Persian architecture in that sense. Apparently, there was a fountain also inside, and with an elephant. That fountain has apparently been taken away, or it was destroyed by Aurangazeb in the last war with Golconda. So the monument luckily has not seen any major damage. There's a small mosque, not a mosque, it's actually a madrasa. I mean, 400 years ago, when we didn't have the concept of schools and colleges, basically it served as a seminary for students. Outside the Charminar, you have two mosques. One is called the Makkah Masjid, which is the more famous big one, as it is larger, everybody knows. But that was built much later. The original mosque of the Charminar, like built when the Charminar was built, is this smaller Jama Masjid that is just outside on the left side, completely hidden by a lot of encroachments in the front. So that was the mosque built outside the Charminar in 1595, 1596. So yeah, so that was exactly. So the Charminar, it is nothing but like it's like a public square built for the new city, and all of the new things came around it. So that is exactly what it's still. I mean, I can't say that anymore that it is the cities, because the old city is obviously not the city center anymore. We have high-tech city now. So high-tech city is to Hyderabad what Hyderabad used to be to Golconda, to put it simply.
Right. Yeah, I think that is a proper analogy, I think, right, to compare that to the new extension of sorts, right, to the existing city or the old city.
Exactly. Yeah.
And just in terms of the structure as well, you can go up the stairs, right? You can go up to
You can go up to the first floor.
Yeah. You can go up,
You can
but
go up
I
to the
guess
first
the
floor.
madrasa and all of that's probably out of bounds, I'm assuming.
I believe someone committed suicide a couple of decades ago. So after that, they shut down the monument for a very long time, and they reopened it, but they only allow us to go to the first floor now.
Okay. Interesting. And these four minarets also, right? The minars, like in the name, those are also kind of very symbolic of a lot of these Islamic structures, right?
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, it's when we say Islamic structure, also, I guess in that sense, we're probably referring to structures that were built by Muslim kings, because I don't think Charminar in that sense was meant to be like a Muslim monument, because it is a proper mixed fusion of Indo-Persian architecture. It's a proper. I would say it was a proper secular building constructed by the king, because apart from the Qutub Shahis and the Persians, it was the local Telugus who were living in Hyderabad and who pretty much had a very high status right from the beginning.
No, that's fair enough. No, I think that's fair. And also tell us a little bit more about the markets around Charminar as well, right? Because these are also very popular and not just very new also, right? These have been around for a long time, right, Yunus?
So the thing is, the city, one of the main reasons why Hyderabad was built also was because of the necessity to have new markets. It's like this: the main or the more famous market is something called the Lad Bazaar or the Chudi Bazaar, where people, it is the Bangle market, right? And there's a lot of shopping and stuff that happens there. So, what the history books tell us is that Hyderabad used to be this extremely fancy international city where it drew a lot of foreigners and stuff at some point of time. And apparently, the city was so fancy that it also had an exit visa that was mandatory for foreigners to show what they were taking back from here. It's not that anymore. It's more like a market for pearls. Pearls is a very recent thing that has come there. It's not a very old thing. So it's just that. So the thing is, under the last Nizam also, to encourage a lot of trade, he did bring in a lot of Marwadi traders, which is why you have some very old shops there. These are shops that sell things like Itar, and basically on the way to the Charminar, there's a very old shop which has a board that says that this particular person was allowed to set up a fruit stall here by special permission from the Nizam. So you have these kind of things that exists. But as far as the markets are concerned, it's mostly local shopping, and also now there is a modern market for clothes, mostly for the weddings and stuff.
Yeah.
So these are the things that you will find there now.
Yeah, Faiza would have told you a lot of our wedding shopping was done there. Like she did a lot of purchasing from there as well. But yeah, even in the past, again, I don't know, like how, like you mentioned, right? The pearl trading, it's like known as the city of the pearls, also, right? Referred to it as a lot of times, and even the diamonds, right? Not necessarily from this place, but from Golconda.
So the thing is, diamonds were mined mostly from one particular place in the Golconda kingdom, and that is called the Kollur area, which is on the Andhra-Karnataka border. Some books also mention that is the place from where the Koinu diamond was mined. It's entirely possible. But the diamond trading that happened stopped back then itself. Okay, so it's not something that's happening now. There's a misconception that the Golconda fort had diamond mines because the diamonds were mined from the Kollur area and then it was cut and sold inside the Golconda fort. So the Golconda fort developed a reputation as a diamond market. So that's how the Golconda kingdom became famous for diamond trading. So one of the main reasons to move out of the fort and to build a new city also was the fact that they needed new markets for this kind of stuff as well.
Sure.
So the diamond trading was there, but the diamond mines ran out long ago. So it's not there. If that market is not there anymore, because we need to understand that after Hyderabad was destroyed in 1687, it became the capital of the Deccan once again only in 1765. So 65, 75, nearly 80 years is when city was pretty desolate and destroyed. There's we have like old grain markets and Begum Bazaar and stuff, but diamond markets, no.
Okay. And just in terms of the other structures from, say, the Qutub Shahi period, right? Are there any others that you covered during the work, or these are the primary ones?
So earlier we used to go to the Makkah Masjid also, but now because of COVID, I think it's been shut for people. Well, there's Guldar House and Guldar House, Charminar, Badshah Ashur Khan. Of course, there's a Char Kaman. So the Char Kaman is just comes on the way. So these are essentially you have these 4 huge arches that you come across before reaching the Charminar. So these arches were built as entrances to the new city of Hyderabad when it was built, with each serving a different purpose. Like the one on the western arch essentially was supposed to be where the original palaces were built. The palaces were also destroyed in 1687, and one side of the arch was essentially the entrance to a market and things like that. So those arches are still there, luckily.
And in terms of, like I mentioned, these are mostly the Qutub Shahi monuments, right? What are the others that are, say, later during the periods of the Asaf Jahis? What are the other monuments that came up that you'd like to call out and are a part of your other works, Yunus?
Sometimes, like I said, sometimes I also combine both those periods. So I do like the Charminar and Chowmahalla Palace, and the other place is the Nizam's Museum, where you have a lot of artifacts from the last Nizam's time, which were gifted to him on his completion of 25 years as a king in 1937. So that the Nizam Museum is a very interesting place. It's a private museum still run by the last Nizam's family. Sometimes I also do a very alternative walk is what I call it, where we don't go to all these places. What we do is we kind of walk from the Musi river from the other side. I try to cover, like for example, near the Badshah Ashur Khana, you have something called the Government City College. So Government City College is what was built around in 1920s when Hyderabad was being modernized. So you have that city college, and then I cover, like, we can't enter the High Court, but we can at least see it from outside. And then you have this 1908 flood, where you have a couple of markers on the main road from when the city was flooded in 1908. So we try to cover those places. It's like a very different walk that I do, where we don't actually go to any major monument, but we see the lesser known things. And we end up at the end try to go to a radio service place which has been running since 1948 called Mehboob Radio Service.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And just calling out the couple of places you mentioned, right? The Chowmahalla Palace and Nizam's Palace. Yeah. All of these belong to the Asaf Jahi period, and more so to the last king, right? Amir Osman Ali Khan. Right. I was really kind of surprised to find out, like, he, at one point in time, he was considered to be the richest person in the world, right?
Yeah. He was also 1937 is when I believe, or 1938 is when he appeared on the cover of Time magazine. Um, yeah, so he did. So the thing is, under Usman Ali Khan, it's not just that he was rich because they had a great source of income. It's also the fact that a lot of the income was directly through tax collections and farm. It's like you had the Nizams and you had state appointed landlords who were supposed to pay the Nizams or the government a certain amount of money regularly. That was the whole point of the whole revenue of the state depended upon the tax collection from farmers, which the top of the food chain were the Nizams, and then you had the Paigas, and then you had the other nobility, and then you had the whole bunch of Jagirdars who were essentially revenue collectors. Like 60% of the entire Nizam state, which was the largest state in India among all the princely states, 60% of it was essentially revenue lands. So you can imagine how much of revenue was being collected at that point of time. It's not surprising that he became the richest man at that point of time. It was essentially a feudal system. It was pretty much but that was the prevalent situation everywhere. So there's no one to blame for that. So yeah, he was the richest man. There are a lot of stories about his wealth and how much money he had. And very surprisingly, is one of those few people who, in spite of having a lot of wealth, never wasted it. People call him a miser, that he was a miser, but I don't think he was a miser at all. I think so. Misers don't spend on anything, but he was somebody who spent on a lot of money on Hyderabad to reconstruct
Right.
the city. He spent money on the city's infrastructure, which not a lot of people did with that much interest. So I think it's primarily that he didn't spend it himself, and because he didn't look like a typical Indian king who had a lot of money, in the sense that he was not wasting it upon himself. Maybe that's why you wouldn't expect a king to maybe use his radio twice or thrice in his lifetime, and you wouldn't
Yeah, he
expect a
wasn't
king.
very opulent that
Yeah,
way
yeah,
for the
exactly,
show of
exactly,
it, right?
exactly, exactly. So if you look at his photos post Hyderabad annexation to India, also you'll find him wearing a very tiny, like he look like a very diminutive
Right.
figure with just blue, white shalwar kameez or kurta pajama. So even if you look at the older class, nobility class from Hyderabad,
Right.
even those guys dress up even today. So compared to that, the Nizam looked very ordinary after he was not the Nizam as well. So
Yeah, but it's just that like that fact that he was the richest man. I didn't really know before I started looking into this, and
right.
obviously heard it on your one of your other podcast episodes as well. So that was quite interesting to find out. And a lot of these other palaces as well, right? Of this era, the Falaknuma Palace, for example, is one of the others.
Yeah, so the Falaknuma Palace, unfortunately, I don't have access to it directly because it's run by the Taj group now. So you basically need
Yeah,
to
boom.
spend like
Yeah,
some money on it to go there. Yeah, so
yeah.
I can't do walks there. Yeah, the most of the rest of the walks are in other parts of the city. Like there's one walk I do on churches in Secunderabad. Abbott is actually a very interesting Nizam era place that has a bunch of monuments. Like, for example, there are churches like the St. George's Church, and there's a church called the St. Luke's Hindustani Church, which is a church that was built for Muslim converts to Christianity about 100 years ago. So, where the service still happens in Urdu there because of that. Then in Abbots, you also have the Theosophical Society, and you have a Zoroastrian fire temple, and there's like Sarojini Naidu's house, and then you have the what was earlier the British Residency and now called the King Koti Women's College. So you have a whole bunch of places in Abbots. So Abbots is where I do a couple of walks. Then you have Secunderabad, and then you have the Golconda Fort. It's not the main fort. I do walks in the periphery or the gates of the Golconda Fort, which have massive bastions and other pathways. And then we also do walks at the Qutub Shahi tombs. So yeah, so it's like a bunch of places in different parts.
Yeah, definitely a lot of options if anybody's interested, and we'll definitely add links to Yunus's social media handle. So for anybody who's interested, can definitely sign up, and perhaps we can also try and as a part of the podcast episode, we can do a giveaway for a few listeners, perhaps. Now, before we start wrapping up the episode, Yunus, one thing we definitely can't miss out is the food of Hyderabad. Obviously, you touched upon the dosas, which is fairly new piece of it, but biryani and
Of course,
Irani
right,
chai
right.
is obviously traditionally what is associated to Hyderabad. Do you want to touch upon that, where one should
Yes.
go?
Yeah. So the thing is, if you're in Hyderabad, so it's very subjective. People generally run to the old city for Shadab and Nayab.
Right.
It's okay if you like it. It's not personally where I would go. Nayab is still nice for breakfast. You have like keema roti, bhaji urda bheja, and they have a whole bunch of options which most people love. And I'm sure a lot of people know this from Hyderabad. What you get in restaurant is not exactly Hyderabadi biryani, because Hyderabadi biryani is a lot milder. It tastes very different, and it mostly is something you get only at homes and at Muslim weddings or at weddings, because depending on which cook you hire. Good biryani still, my favorites are Grand Hotel. Grand is the oldest Irani cafe also, slash restaurant, built in 1935. Nearby, you have Cafe Bahar, which is also another Irani restaurant. I've not been there in a while, at least I remember it being good. Then you have this place called Biryani Wala and Quad Banjara Hills. This is actually very good. I would personally recommend it also to people. So now Hyderabad House is back. It's a very nostalgic thing for a lot of Hyderabadis, where it used to be one of the few places that would sell halim, marag. Marag is basically it's like a stew. I guess it's a rich soup, which is it essentially has pieces of like very specific parts of mutton which are attached. It has it has parts. It is made with parts of mutton which are attached to the bone, so that it's softer. Then you have also, let me see, Bawarchi is also supposed to be good. Last I remember it was good, but I have not been there again in a very long time. Funnily, I end up going to Grand most of the time because it is my personal favorite, so I do have a bias there.
Okay.
Incidentally, Grand Hotel's owner also, they also run a chain of restaurants called Mehfil. There's one at one of the Mehfil chains at Sheikhpet has very good biryani. It's also my personal favorite mostly. And in the old city, there's a place called, now it just opened recently, called Khan Mia. They do a very decent biryani as well, and they also have some other interesting things which people can check out if they're interested. Fanuz is also Fanuz and Khan Mia run by the same person, but Fanuz also pretty good. Like Fanuz, FANOOZ. It's one of the few places in Hyderabad which actually sells proper Hyderabadi food. Marag, क्या बोलते हैं, Shima, Lukmi, and stuff. So if you want to try all those things, I would highly recommend that as well. But aside from that, I guess I would say Paradise and Alpha Hotel are two of my favorite places even today for breakfast, for like a proper keema roti breakfast. For chai, I love the chai at Alpha Hotel, Irani chai, Alpha Hotel, Grand, Garden Cafe. Yeah, I guess these are my three favorites for chai.
Yeah, tell us how this Irani chai is different from the regular chai. I mean, here we primarily get like more Sulaimani, I guess, in Bangalore. But yeah, tell us a little bit about the Irani chai as well, how it's different.
So Sulaimani is basically black tea, and I believe that has more. It's more of an Arab thing, because if you look, because that's what Kerala has culturally speaking. Because Kerala's Muslims are more closely linked to the Arab world than, let's say, the other Persia in that sense. The Iranians who came here, see, the thing is, when the Iranians who came here didn't exactly come as rich people. These are Iranians who came roughly 100 years ago, and they pretty much came for migration purposes. Like, how Indians today go to the Gulf or the Middle East to make something of their lives, right? Pretty much the same thing. Hyderabad was easier, Urdu speaking place. A lot of people knew Persian also at about 100 years ago. It's like many cases, one person or 3 or 5 persons would run one cafe together, and then you would have like a dozen or like half a dozen Iranians who would come down and then who would work at the cafe, and then they would slowly branch out and start new cafes on their own. That's how Irani cafes basically started. And the thing is, the chai is different because the black tea, the decoction and the milk are basically boiled for hours and hours together, and that's what makes it very different. So it's very different if you just mix in the tea, so the tea leaves, the water and the milk for like 15 minutes, and if you make your chai as against this particular thing, but it's a lot tastier in that sense. You can actually feel the flavor of the tea even though you add milk, because of course tea people who are very puritanical about tea say that you should not add milk and tea should be only had with hot water. Of course I disagree with that, but anyway, that's what makes the tea different. There are different variations of it depending on what kind of tea leaves that people use, or how much decoction they put and things like that. But it's a very distinctive chai flavor that you get, and I think even cities like Delhi don't actually have a good chai culture in that sense. So I think Hyderabad's chai culture is pretty equivalent to what is the Suleimani chai culture back in Kerala.
Yeah, no fair. And where do you recommend you say one tries out Irani chai?
So if somebody wants to go sit somewhere and have chai, I would always say Grand Hotel is a good option. Garden Cafe. Garden is now they have to reconstruct the bakery again, so I don't know how long that will take. Paradise is also not a bad option, to be fairly honest. Grand Hotel Paradise, Cafe Bahar is good. Sarvi Hotel at Banjara Hills is also a decent place. In the old city, Nimra Cafe has become very famous, but Nimra is not exactly what I would say is the original Irani chai in that sense. Because a lot of places now have started to add a bit of condensed milk to the chai to make it a little tastier. So that kind of loses the essence of what Irani chai is supposed to be. So Grand, Cafe Bahar, Alpha Hotel is my favorite. Yeah, actually Alpha Hotel, Garden, these places still keep it real in that sense.
Okay, yeah, definitely something to try out. And while we close this off, also give us a little bit of a sense of Dakhni or the Urdu. That's also very, I think, peculiar to this part of the country, right? I know in Bangalore we speak very similar Urdu as well.
So it's a different, no, Bangalore also what people speak is Dakhni only. It's just a different variation of Dakhni. So thing it's a very long and complicated answer. But to put it simply, Urdu is actually a very recent language. It's not a very old language. This has come up in the 1600s only under Shah Jahan's time. So and before Urdu, you have Dakhni, that is what is spoken in Hyderabad, Bangalore, and other places in South India. This goes back to the 14th century. But both Dakhni for those, just to put it simply, is a mix of Persian with Hindustani, with Kannada, Marathi, and Telugu. Urdu is a direct mix between Persian and Hindi, or maybe not necessarily. I mean, I guess the dialects of North India in that sense is what I would say. Because the word Urdu actually means army camp in Turkish. Okay, it's because the thing is Persian was like this high-level language of the nobility of the elite. That is why all of the documents pretty much are in Persian and not in Urdu, and not until the 1800s, or at least not until the 1700s. Maybe I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure. But if you look at the evolution, you had both the Dakhni and Urdu that go back to Delhi in the 14th century. When Delhi comes down to the Deccan in Maharashtra is when you have it mixing with Marathi and then with Kannada, Marathi and Telugu. So in that sense, Dakhni comes first. In the 1460, with something called Kadamrao is the first evidence of Dakhni that we have. So Dakhni continued to evolve until the late 1600s. Hyderabad's destruction basically ended Dakhni literature. But after the destruction of Hyderabad, poets went down even south to Tamil Nadu, and the tradition of Dakhni continued there for nearly 1 century. But it was because of the Mughals who finally came, and because Urdu was adopted eventually by the Mughals and later by the Nizams, Urdu kind of became like this official language. But Dakhni continued to survive as a spoken language. That's why in Bangalore and Hyderabad, other parts of the South India where we speak in Dakhni, we read and write in Urdu.
Right.
It's a very weird thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't kill language so easily. So a lot of people don't realize this because this is as much as Urdu is being targeted these days politically. Urdu, in a way, is what was superimposed upon Dakhni speakers.
Sure.
And though the base was the same, there is a very distinctive difference in the sense that Dakhni is more Dravidian and is more linked to South Indian languages in the way it is spoken and the way it's structured. It is structured. That's what I can say.
Interesting. But yeah, it's just very fine and very nuanced. I think it's there's like little differences, but we definitely do use very common words like manje, nako, kaiko.
So manje is not actually used here,
It's not?
but
Okay.
no. So manje is used in, like I said, it's used in Tamil Nadu. It's used in Andhra Pradesh.
Right.
But like the things like kaiko, nako, houses are all from Marathi, right? So
Right. Yeah, that's true.
exactly, right? So people don't actually get this. So and even if I tell someone in Hyderabad that what you're speaking is actually it has parts of Marathi. So because when we talk about all of this, we tend to unnecessarily glorify Urdu. Urdu is just another Indian language, which is spoken by a lot of people even today.
No, fair. I think in simple, very layman or layperson terms, if somebody is heard to, Danish said does a lot of these very funny skits. He used to do these on radio at least a while ago, right? Asghar and all of those.
Yeah. So in fact, every time Danish would say something in called Urdu, me and I have a couple of friends, all of us would very fervently share it on our stories, and we would say call it Dakhni, and we would tag him. So I realized that him and someone named Rida Tarana, and one more woman, what's her name, Zoha, son of from Chennai. I realized that now these guys have started using the word Dakhni Urdu at least. So I think in that sense, some kind of activism or at least some kind of awareness has been created, at least through my work and through others.
Definitely. And also for me, at least personally, one of the introduction to the Hyderabadi way of speaking was through this movie that came out, I think it's been a few years now, called The Angrez.
The Angrez. Oh, yeah. So actually, I don't like it much because it's actually a very sad portrayal of Hyderabad. So I would honestly say there are 100, like for example, there are Shyam Benegal's movies. If you know who Shyam Benegal is, he's a proper Hyderabadi from Secunderabad. There are old movies, for example, a movie called Ankur. Right. If anybody wants to watch, Ankur is a movie that includes properly spoken Dakhni, and it goes over the whole landlord Jagirdar situation. So it's a very socially powerful movie. So if you want to listen to proper Dakhni, go watch Ankur.
Yeah. No, Angrez was definitely like over the top type of a portrayal, but it definitely did open up to a lot of people, right?
Yeah, of course. I won't disagree. So the interesting part is not the Angrez, but there's another movie. So that character, what is that
Salim
Peku?
Salim Peku, Ismail Bhai.
Ismail Bhai. So this Ismail Bhai comes in other. He comes in other movies. Like there are a whole bunch of movies that were made after the Angrez on similar lines. In those movies, when they show a couple of characters, those characters like people who work in the lower strata of society. They have got Dakhni spot on in that. Recently there's a movie called Bolo How that was released last year. I wouldn't say it's a masterpiece, but then that movie actually goes into the lives of ordinary people, of these workers who used to work for these Nawabs, and what happens to these Nawabs after the annexation to India, right? When all of these Nawabs basically become poor, they don't have money, but they have these big houses, and they need to take care of those houses. Okay. It's I wouldn't say it's a great masterpiece, but it's a move in the right direction for movies on Hyderabad and Deccan. There's one more movie also called Mandi by Shyam Benegal. I think that's also made in Dakhni. It's a movie set in Hyderabad again. So if it's it has a whole bunch of old actors like Shabana Azmi, Smita Patel, Nasiruddin Shah, Amrish Puri. So if anyone wants to go for that, go for that.
Okay, yeah, definitely some good recommendations to actually get the more authentic versions of this, I think. But yeah, Angrez is like slapstick and over the top type of thing.
Yeah, of
just
course,
for killing some time. But yeah, thanks so much, Yunus. I think it was a great introduction to Hyderabad, the old city part of Hyderabad as well, not just the monuments and the history, but you touched upon a lot of interesting things, right from the stories to food, and now a little bit of an overview of Dakhni and some interesting movies as well. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure and an honor for us to have you on the platform.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure talking to you. It was great. Actually, I always love talking about these things. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, Yunus. That was yet another great episode on the Musafir Stories. Make sure to show us some love by sharing the podcast with your friends and family. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Musafir Stories. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM podcast app or the website. Follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.